born in Alustar, in Kedah, but I think I stayed in Alustar probably about a year before we moved to Hutan Melintang near Bagan Datuk. So my father had a restaurant in this copra plantation, and I can still remember bathing in the river and then seeing the the Hindu temple about 500 meters away. And I think I was about 4 or 5 years old. I saw one of the Hindu gods walking 30 feet high. I've never forgotten that. So body was human and it's ash colored, and from the chest onwards is the shape of the gopuram. My mother told me I had a fever for 1 week. So, I don't think even the Hindus can see. So that was actually a signifier of what was going to happen later. So we were there for maybe about a year or two before we moved again, and we came to Penang. And that probably was 1949. And then in 1950 we moved to Julutong, where we stayed for very longer time compared to all the others. So Julutong is the town that's famous for where there was, I think, the first newspaper, Sheikh Al-Hadi was operating it, and it's also famous as the birthplace, if I'm not mistaken, of the most famous Ketua Pengarah of Filem Negara, Muhammad Zain Hussein. So I knew his family, I knew his brothers, and he was actually given away after he was born. So that's why his name is Muhammad Hussein when it should have been Ismail. So that's another story. And he was in one of the members of Force 136, and he was a real war hero. Unfortunately, he was never recognized. So I remember seeing all the Bangsawan and the Chinese opera there. And when we came there, I still remember a pony cart, a small cart being pulled by a pony. That was 1950. And there were these trams with the huge wheels and running on electric lines. And every time they turn a corner, the pole will get off. So when we came to Julutong, I still remember there was one cart pulled by a pony. And I think after a few months, it wasn't seen anymore. So probably they gave up. And at that time, we could ride bicycles on the highways and the major roads, and we can even overtake buses. Not today. So I went to Malay school in 1952, and we learned Jawi. We sat on the floor on square carpets, and we had slates to write with chalk. And I still remember having drawn an apple, and there was a pass mark, and I was so proud, took it home to show. And I was there for, I think, 2 years or 3 years. And some of my friends who later became quite famous, like Datuk Hashim MB, who read the RTM News, was opposite my house. And we were in Malay school, and then we were also in English school, and then in secondary school. And so from there we moved to Westlands English School, to a special Malay class. So it was all Malays, but in the photo I think I saw a lot of non-Malays. I don't know why they call it special Malay class. And the first person to introduce me to storytelling was a Chinese teacher. I don't remember his name, but I was so enthralled with the stories that he told in English class. And I still remember the story of the Chinese monkey god. I was very much attracted to it. And then I remember reading my father's a copy of the Ramayana. And you know, the Ramayana is a story which Joseph Campbell has analyzed as the example of his analysis of the hero's journey, that all stories in the world, and even Hollywood feature films, genre films, use that structure. The hero in his ordinary world, then he goes into the special world, and then he has to return to his ordinary world with new knowledge and new experiences. So this is the 3-act structure which is found in all mythologies and legends. So I think that also affected me subconsciously. Then I was very much into comics. So I used to read a lot of comics, especially I was interested in classics illustrated. So these were the English literature books like Sir Walter Raleigh, Treasure Island, that were turned into comics. So from early on, I was introduced to both visuals and text. And then when I remember in Westland School, my first introduction to cinema. So they had a projector and they had weekly screenings. And I was really crazy. I would attend every one, and I volunteered to be the guy who will put on the light and put off the light. And I remember seeing a Filem Negara film, and the title coincidentally was Hassan's Homecoming. And it attracted me, and it was only later when I came to Filem Negara, I wanted to see that film again. And then I discovered it was directed by Muhammad Zain Hussein. And he unconsciously used the structure of the hero's journey. And visually, he understood how to apply the film language. The films shown there captivated me, but of course, I had no idea about what film was. And one day, something strange, I found something very strange. Our house, next to our house was a sandy lane. Now, there were no cinemas in Julutong. The nearest cinema was about 6 miles away in Georgetown. And I found 6 or 7 frames of a 35mm I think it was a Hindi film. Where it came from, I do not know. Unfortunately, I didn't keep it. I don't know where it went to. So I was looking at it, I said, why are the pictures all the same? I didn't know that, it needs to be projected and so on. So of course, going to Kuala Lumpur was the turning point in my life. If I stayed in Penang, I would not have gone anywhere. I went for an interview to be accepted as a teacher. I failed the interview. So what the ministry, or rather the education fraternity, failed to get, the film community got. But if I had gotten in as a teacher, I would also have done a few things. Well, there were 8 of us, 5 brothers, 3 sisters, and only one got into university. That was my sister, number 7. And she was the one that I was closest to. And it was a good thing that I had a camera at that time, in the 60s. I have a complete record of them growing up. And now we have nieces, grandnieces, and whatever. And they have a different mentality as compared to us. So we were under the British. And I felt that under the British, we never had any problems. No race relations, conflicts or whatever, unlike now. And of course, in school, we had English headmasters, and they really looked after the students. They were really very dedicated, and they told us how to greet others. And when we say good morning, we do this like tipping our hat, but nothing out of the ordinary. And of course we moved house a couple of times within Julutong itself. Relatives used to come to the house even from far, even from Alustar. They used to come, stay, and so on. So very close family unit at that time. And when I had to do circumcision, my mother and my father would be going around the country, starting a restaurant here and there, leaving my mother alone. So she couldn't afford it. So we were, I and my cousin, we were circumcised together in Chulia Street. Oh, what they would do is they would dress us up very nicely with flowers over the songkok and so on. And then they will take us in a car, and they came to the facsimile tomb of the famous saint in India, Saul Hamid, which is somewhere along Chulia Street. They just brought some sand from India, from the actual tomb, and they go there for prayers and so on. So he has been my patron saint, because when I was born, my father made a prayer in his name, and I think he's the one who's been guiding me. And I can't say I'm exceptionally good, but I think it's because of him that a lot of things happen. And even my master predicted I was going to get the Merdeka Award 48 years before that. So we can talk about that one later lah. Jadi apa ni, the whole idea of my uncle taking over the cost of the circumcision and so on was that, you know, in the traditional family, that from very early age you are already designated to marry this girl in the other family. So of course I didn't know all this. So when it came time for me to marry, I was invited to lunch. So when you are invited to lunch, that's a danger sign. And then is the girl who's cook and to show that she can be a good wife. Then after that, I had to sit with the uncle. And of course the uncle said, you have had my daughter's cooking. Now you go home and you tell your mother, if it's okay with you, then we can arrange the marriage. So of course I disappeared to KL. And my brother married her. So this also happened to another one in Singapore, a relative. Also I disappeared. So another brother married her. And then there was another girl, also arranged with my father. Nobody knew this, in Crow. And I also ran off to, lucky thing I was working in Kuala Lumpur. So I married late at the age of 35. And that was after having gone halfway around the world. I thought I'd be marrying someone foreign. No, it happened, married the girl working in Filem Negara. And that was also match made, you know. And I wasn't thinking of getting married. And then this Indian girl came. She said, there's this girl from Perlis working with me. Why don't I introduce you to her and see how things go? I said, okay. Well, from early on, I think even from the age of 12 or 13, I was not your usual good boy. So I was a big headache for my mother. And I had a group of friends in the village. And that's where I would go and hang around with them. And one of them was a member of a gangster triad in Penang, the Chinese gang. And he had this Siamese spiritual knowledge. I have pictures of all these guys, and we were really, really good friends. But after we all separated, went our own ways, I was the only one to go back and meet this particular guy who was a gangster. Towards the end of his life, he changed. He became someone who was helping out at the mosque and so on. So that was quite a surprise. But I was not surprised because I knew that all of us, like what Shakespeare said, there is a time and there is a tide in the lives of people. He actually knew a lot of things about life and the spiritual part. So we all have our lives to lead, and we shouldn't look down upon other people, no matter what they are. Because you may be good today, but tomorrow, we do not know. You might be even worse than he is. So whenever I go back to Penang from KL, I would go and meet them, but I can see there is a change. Because once they are working, and then you have a family and so on, it's a different ball game. Now I was very, very naughty. In school, I would usually sit at the back of the class, and in my textbook, I would have a comic book. Because I was called King Comic, because I read all the comics and I would travel miles and miles to get comics from my friends. So, but anyway, that is what contributed to my success. So you see, nobody knows what actually you can become, and anything at all that you experience contributes to that development of your character. I always tell my students that you have to mix with people who are smarter than you are, then only you are going to progress. But if you don't have that, the next best thing is to read books, watch films, travel. So these are the things that will help your mind to grow. So, and carry a small book with you. So I remember reading in one of the books that I borrowed from the library, it said, know something about everything, know everything about something. And I found that to be very, very helpful, that I know my subject, but I also know something about other subjects. So when I am working on this, all this is the back of my mind, and they come into play. And sometimes when I'm speaking, a lot of people are surprised. How is it that you know a lot of things? I say, actually, I do not know. I just know some of the basics, but I apply it to my particular subject. I was in Filem Negara, and my staff were from UiTM. Now I had to think, how can I be better, as good as they are, even though most of them were not good. So I said, I discovered I will do mind map, and when you work on the mind map and then you pull lines, you can go anywhere, and it is non-linear. So you can jump from one subject to another subject, and then by jumping, you can even initiate thoughts in other directions. So another thing is the Marxist-Hegelian principle that is used in film. So the word montage actually means editing. And in Eisenstein's theory of montage in the 1920s, he said that if thesis collides with antithesis, it will create synthesis. In simple words, when you take one idea, you bring it together with another totally different idea, it will create a new idea. How do you apply it to film? A man is in jail and is looking out of the window, and the camera is taking him from outside. Then you take a shot of a bird from somewhere, you edit it together, a new idea comes out, which is freedom. But that idea is not there in the visuals. But then of course Andre Bazin came in the 40s and he said, oh, film is not montage, it's mise-en-scène. Actually it's both. So I discovered many of the theories in film in my experience in doing illustration, doing signboards and so on, because I was forever thinking. So for cinematographers, soundmen, editors, it's very important to sit and observe people and try to figure out what do they do, what kind of people are they, and a lot can be said from the look. That is why casting is very important in film. So all these things I was already picking up, so that when I got into film, it was quite easy compared to the UiTM graduates who only studied graphic design. Only now they are beginning to see that design and animation and film has got to come together, which I was already talking about in the 1970s. Okay, we have to understand religion and spirituality. What are they? If a person is religious, not necessarily is he a spiritual person. But if you are a spiritual person, you are a religious person. But above all, a person needs to be a moral person. Okay? Even in script writing, we have what we call the moral premise. And you will find that even in Hollywood movies, they are talking about spirituality, but they structure it in a manner where it is not in your face. It's not actually talking about religion or particular religion or about spirituality. We see the person behaving morally, for instance, like the wedding planner. In terms of production design and her character and her father, we find that they are very moral people. They are like ancient people. And now they are in contact with people of the modern day. So can they maintain that? So that's what comes out. So I have found that when I first started, when I was young, I never did any prayers. I didn't know anything, even though I went to religious classes and so on. But it was just like any other lesson. So there was no significance to it, because we were not with people who are really spiritual. Then it will be a different thing. So it was only when I came to KL that I was living in Kampung Baru, and my final master was living just about 1.5 kilometers away. And I never met him. But the first house that I stayed in for 2 weeks, it was the house of one of his oldest students. So you see, a lot of things were destined. And in the 7 years before I met him, I went from one master to another master. So I learned 3 kinds of silat, 2 kinds of kung fu, and also judo. And from those masters, I learned a little bit about religion and so on. And they said, you must pray and so on. So of course, I began prayer. And then I began to study about it. So we got to understand that we are in this world to know ourselves. And then only we can know God. Know yourself thoroughly, and you will know your God who is not hidden from you. It's only when you are spiritual that things are opened up to you. Okay? But if you don't follow the Sharia, you will never get it. What is spirituality? Living your life simply, with no hate, and you treat everybody the same, whether it's a child, whether it's an older person. And actually it's very simple, but it's not very simple to do. Well, actually, when I was in school, I was already making some money, because there was a teacher in my village, and she wanted some posters done to use as a training material for her school. So when I was given the job, of course I didn't ask how much, but I got paid. I can't remember how much. I think it was 2 or 3 ringgit lah. But at that time, 2 or 3 ringgit is a lot. So I did all those training illustrations, and then I was also giving tuition. I remember I was already giving tuition at the age of 12, because my English was very good, because I used to read 1 book a day, storybooks lah, not school books. And I managed to make some money from primary school to secondary school. And then after leaving school, after I failed my Form 5, I was working at my father's restaurant, and he asked me to do the signboard for his shop. I never done anything like that. I have a picture of that, and of course I didn't get paid for that. You do or you don't eat. So I think that was my first commercial job, I can say. In 1964, when I came to KL in November, started work November 15, 1964 at Robinson's department store. At that time, it was the only department store in Malaysia, and it was British owned, and the general manager was from England, and the floor managers were all Europeans. So I was an assistant to my former classmate. He was working as a window display man and commercial artist. So he wanted me to help do the painting, because when I was in school, he was asked to do a mural on the school wall. So I was one of the people who assisted. So things moved from there. There was like an inciting incident. And so he remembered, and then he sent me a letter, and the letter went to the wrong address, but the postman those days, they have heart. So he thought probably that the number, like my house number was 406, it was written as 460. So probably they said there's nobody by this name. So he would have thought it should be 406. My father said, okay, go. This is something different from working. My father was always starting restaurants here and there. So probably he didn't want me to follow in his footsteps. And I came, and my salary was 100 ringgit a month. And at that time, of course, it wasn't too bad, because teh tarik was 10 cents, roti canai was 10 cents, biryani was 1 ringgit, and so on. And bus fare was 5 cents. So I had to make do. And then a few months later, my friend went to a teaching job. So he wasn't really interested in working commercially. So I had no boss, so I became the boss. And then, like Oliver Twist, after a month or two, I went to see the general manager to ask for a salary increase. I was fired. But lucky thing, there was a floor manager. He said, don't worry, I'll speak to the manager. And so I didn't leave. But my pay went up by 50 ringgit. And then everything I knew about commercial art, I learned there on my own. I became a member of the Lincoln Center. They had a library, and also the British Council. And of course, I went to look for books on window display, commercial art, and so on. And that's where I began to understand that there was a methodology to doing things. And I discovered about fonts. At the time, we call it typeface. So I made use of all of that. And the good thing was, the managers never actually told me what to do. They just told me what is it that they wanted, and they left everything to me. And I remember the final general manager that I worked under, I was there for 4 years. When he took over, he called me and he said, I'm going to leave everything to you carte blanche. And I think I was lucky that even some of the managers and the floor managers, they saw something in me, and they offered advice. And in 1967 or 68, I got interested in medicine, so I thought I want to take up medicine. So in 1974, I took my HSC, because that's the way to get into university. But of course, it didn't turn out. So the manager used to give me articles and magazines on medicine. So you see, the Europeans, they are keen on people who want to learn things. And I think that is what worked for me. Even in Filem Negara, it was the same thing. They knew that I was keen on doing new things, and I think I was the only staff who used to go to the boss and ask to do something. And I had ideas. I said, can I do this film? And they said, yes. No one ever did that. They were always avoiding work. There were 4 people on the interview panel. One of them was J.S. Anthony, the art director with Shaw Brothers in Singapore. That was my first connection with film. The other one was the deputy director of Filem Negara Malaysia, Wong Kai Wing. So they asked me a lot of questions because I thought I wasn't going to get it. So they asked me, can you show us your certificate? So they said, can you show us your certificate? Because I hadn't received it yet. I only received the slip. So I said, I can show you the certificate, but this is the slip. So they were very impressed. And of course, I forgot about it after the interview. Then a couple of months later, I received a letter, when can you report for duty? So I was, of course, shocked. And so I tendered my resignation. And the boss, through the floor manager, offered me higher pay because he had seen the work that I do, especially during the annual sale. Some of the window displays that I did generated sales. And even one European woman came to me when I was doing the display. She said, just now I was up there, I saw this cloth that you were displaying, it didn't attract me. The lady said, when I was upstairs, I saw the same cloth, but it didn't attract me. But when I came down, I saw the display that you did, it looked so good, so I went back and bought it. And when I left, the testimonial given by the boss was really, really great. So very seldom a European will praise you unless you have really done well. So I reported for duty on the 1st of November 1968. So about 25 years later, I was on a jury at RTM evaluating the documentaries of RTM producers. Next to me was the guy who interviewed me, Wong Kai Wing. And next here on this side was the former Director General of Filem Negara, who was actually responsible for getting me into animation. So I asked Wong Kai Wing, Mr. Wong, I've always been curious to know why you chose me out of all the others when they were so much better and so on. He said you had 3 things that they didn't have. One, you had distinction in English that we hadn't heard about. And then number 2, you were doing a job that we had never heard about, window display. Because the window display outside there, huge. It's like a set design that you do. And then you taught yourself, you did not wait to be sent for training. This is the kind of people that we are looking for. So I must say that he chose wisely, because I think he thought that if I had distinction in English, I'll definitely become a writer. And true enough, I became a writer. And in the 70s and 80s, the short animation film that I had done actually raised the name of Filem Negara. So Filem Negara became known for animation, not for documentaries. So when I started at Filem Negara, for 3 months, I did not have any job. Maybe they thought, I can't handle doing the titling for films. So I was consigned to do posters, signboards, and so on. And there was a signboard that I did for the sound department. It was Tolong Jangan Bising. And believe it or not, it is still in Filem Negara, and it still looks good, and it was put up during an exhibition on artwork at the National Art Gallery. So I have a photo of that. So, so about 3 months later, I received my first title to do. In 1972, we had a new Director General, John Nettleton. So he came up with the idea of making festival trailers, short trailers, 1 minute, 2 minutes, just before a festival. So for me, I found that that was like a foreshadowing or foretelling of my involvement in film and becoming well known because of animation, even though I've left animation behind. So when I saw it on the screen, I was of course hooked. So I thought, this is my calling. And what did I do? So now I needed to know what animation is. So in our library, film library, there were also films given by Goethe Institute, by the New Zealand Film Unit, New Zealand Commission, Mission, and other foreign missions. Their animation films, they were all on 16mm. So I borrowed and looked at it at the editing console, and I saw frame by frame. Then I knew how to do animation. So of course I copied certain elements. So when you look at it, it looks very, very professional. So if you are interested in what you do, you can achieve anything. If the guy is not interested and you ask him to do, it's not going to happen. So later on, with all that experience came out on screen, the private sector started to notice me. And we didn't have animators in Malaysia at that time. So in 1978, Pearl and Dean contacted me. The director was someone from England who had been an editor on feature films. And I was asked to do animation for Odorono. And it was something that a beginner does not do. It's animation over live action. Not like today where you close your eyes, you can get it done. At that time it was all manual. So the man is playing billiard, and then he hears a voice, and then he moves down to the billiard table. There's a cartoon character standing on the table talking to him. Now I was thinking, how do I match the movement to pen in the character and the guy moving down? And I had to rotoscope. That means if it was 5 seconds, I had to draw 120 frames, and they had to mesh exactly. Otherwise, the character will be moving on the screen. So I went for the meeting. So there was Farida Marikan, the producer. There was the director, Masaleh, Peter Sims. And I was very quiet. So they turned and looked at me. Can you do it? I crossed my fingers and said, no problem. Then the cameraman, who later became a very good friend of mine, Rohini Kumar, he asked me. And I was thinking, what the heck is this? He said, do you want positive image with negative perforation, or do you want positive image with positive perforation? It was all Greek to me. So I crossed my fingers, I said, give me positive with negative perforation. So I went back to Filem Negara, I went to the laboratory, I asked them, what is this? And then they said, you said the right thing. So you see, luck is very important. So there's a technical element involved here. Now in those days, if you are doing animation and it is for commercials, you have to know a lot about the technical aspects, about the camera, what camera to use, and how to plan for the camera. Not like today, you can just shift it around, cut and paste. Last time we had to plan everything on paper. You go and you shoot. The camera can't do anything for you, it just shoots. So I learned a lot about the technical aspects. So later, when we had some really incredible animation work for animation live and so on, I was able to, of course, sit and talk to the director about how it should be shot for me to do the animation. And my last one was the sugus, the 6 fruits dancing on the stage. That was my biggest job. I did it for Indonesia. They liked it so much that they used it for Malaysia. So I got paid 4,000 ringgit for not doing any work. They just reused, because now it's already digital. Then I had to animate lip sync for Taiwan, Hong Kong and Thailand. So that was a major job for me. And then I did the Ribena. I had to go to London to buy the art materials. And I had 2 teams working, morning and night. and it was one of the really big jobs. So I and as assistant, we went to England, met the agency, and we did 15 seconds and 30 seconds, I think, and it was shown in England and other places. Now, this experience working with people who are really good enhanced my knowledge about animation, and also I started to think like a director. So that's what writers must think like a director. That means you got to write as if you're looking through the camera. And why would a director ask me to change this? Because it needs to be visual. You can't say, hey, I like your red shirt. We already can see the shirt is red, so why do you need to mention red? So today we have writers who don't understand all these things. And they say, kelihatan, kedengaran. You cannot put all those words into a screenplay. Why? Because when we are reading, we are seeing the picture in our mind. That means already kita melihat, so why you need to put the word kelihatan? And I'm ashamed to say that some people teaching script writing are making all these mistakes. So when I went into photography, when I was at Robinson's, in 1965, I bought a second-hand camera. I had to take a loan for it. So it would cost me 90 ringgit, and I had to pay it over a few months. So of course, when I had a camera, I needed to learn how to take photos. So I borrowed about 20 over books, and I went through, and I became better than the guy who sold me the camera. And in 1969, in May 13, I was in the front line, and I also ended up in the police station. So I went around photographing, and there are 11 photos. Cost me, I think, 250 at that time. It has made back my money 2,500 ringgit. Why? Because Malaysia Kini used it, and the magazine, Esquire magazine, they used it, and even this Taiwanese filmmaker, he paid 500 ringgit for it. So you see, you never know. So I believe that you have to study many different subjects, even if you think that you're not going to use it. Once you have the knowledge, you will find that the opportunity will arise. People will ask you whether you can do something, and it starts to generate income. So this is what has happened to me all these years. So there is a right way and a wrong way to teach people. So lecturers need to understand the methodology of teaching. Now I, of course, never knew all this. So when I started to teach at the ABU, Asian Broadcasting Union, and of course IPTA, the Training Institute for the Ministry of Information, by working together with people from different countries, I also picked up a lot of things about the culture and so on. And it was because of that that I got the job to train the Sudan TV people. Because one of the senior officers from the Sudan TV came, and when he went back, he was asked, who's the best lecturer there? So he mentioned my name. And then, of course, I got the email, and I went. I'd never been to Africa, so that was quite an experience for me, but I wouldn't want to go and live there. Well, even before the award was given by the Prime Minister, I've already been called that, not because of anything, but because I was the earliest. Even though there was Anandam Xavier before me, but he was not interested in animation. But I was the one who was interested enough to go deeper and to study it, and then apply it in all the films that I've done, and I wanted to be an animator until later when I began to go into film seriously. So, but I prefer the other award given by Nanyang Technological University as one of the Asian animation pioneers, together with 4 other really famous, world famous people, like Ishu Patel from India, who resides in Canada. He was an Academy Award nominee. And then Dr. Nuruddin Zarin Kelk from Iran, an independent animator, very famous one. And then Nelson Shin, who made the first feature film in Korea. and the other one is Ram Mohan, the father of Indian animation. So I would prefer that award because it's a recognition by your peers. That is the most important. I cannot pinpoint any memorable moment because everything for me is memorable. It is all it's what happens to you on your journey, and even if it was bad, it also contributes to your progress. So we shouldn't feel regret, or we shouldn't feel that, you know, I shouldn't have done it and so on. It's done and it's over. The trip to Tokyo, Hiroshima and Osaka, and Kyoto, that was sponsored by the Japan Foundation under their program called the Cultural Leaders Program, and I was the first recipient. I would consider that as the most memorable or momentous event in my life. So I went to a university in Hiroshima, and who is there waiting to meet me is the Vice Chancellor himself and 4 deans. This will never happen in Malaysia. They will always send their minions. And then I was taken personally by the chairman of Japan Foundation Tokyo to meet my favorite director, Yoji Yamada, at Toho Studios. He's the director that I put above all other directors because of the way he tells his stories. And when I introduced his films to Yasmin Ahmad, she was hooked. There's something very unusual about him, and this is why, and my son also, when he saw the film, he was also hooked, and when he heard I was going to meet him, he spent his own money, took his leave and came along with me just to sit and ask one question from Yoji Yamada. I think I can only say that there were 2 regrets in my life. One was connected with the love affair. Okay? If only, it's something like what happened to the hero in Cinema Paradiso. There's a parallel. If only, that's the story, I would have married that girl. So it was unintentional. And the other one related to something which I think I really, really regret, but it was not for the purpose of making money. I thought it's something good for students. So, but looking back, of course, it was not very ethical, but I can't undo it. So I didn't do it for the money. It was just that it was something that was really, really good, and actually the students managed to benefit a lot, you know. So those are the only 2 that I can think. I looked upon technique as narrative, not cinematography as something technical, but as narrative, telling the story. Editing, sound is about telling the story. So that's why all these people involved in film need to understand how the director thinks. So not everybody can become a director, but in Malaysia, every Tom, Dick and Harry can become a director. They call the shots, that's all. But we have to create images, not shots. You take shots, but the shots are actually need to be images. And this is the thing that is very much lacking, the knowledge that is lacking among even the so-called veteran directors. So when I start to talk about film with them, they are stunned.